Hi, it's Gloria Donahue again with Nana's Cookery. So welcome back to the kitchen. And as you can see, it's my new kitchen. We're going to be making a crumb coffee cake. I know I've made coffee cakes before. Coffee cake is a wonderful thing to have, and this one is particularly good. You're going to need flour, sugar, baking powder, baking soda, butter, eggs, salt, cinnamon, vanilla, some Crisco. You're going to need a 13 by 9 pan that is greased and floured, and we're going to cook it at 350. The first thing we're going to do is melt a stick or 4 ounces of butter in the microwave. This recipe doesn't call for any salt in the crumbs, and this is regular butter because it adds that little bit of salt that's in there. And then we're going to stir the dry ingredients, and we're going to add the melted butter to it. When I melt the butter in the microwave, I'm going to do it at a fairly low, don't do it 1 express, because what will happen is some of it will really melt and start to bubble while the rest of it is still melting. So I did it in smaller pieces. I'll do it at a lower heat so that it heats to the same temperature at the same time. We're going to start by creaming the shortening and the butter. The shortening and the sugar. I'm losing it today, folks. You know, different fats create different tastes, and this recipe is a little different because it doesn't call for butter, it doesn't call for oil, it calls for shortening. But it just makes a really nice cake. And remember, creaming is not just the same thing as stirring. You want to start with a room temperature fat. The shortening comes at room temperature. If it were a butter recipe, you would want to bring that butter to room temperature so that you can cream it. When you're going to mix them together, but then you're going to let the mixer fly for a while, and that will cream it. That will make it a nice homogenized, fluffy mixture before you do anything else. And this is almost the way you start every cake. Now the sugar is starting to incorporate into the shortening, but it'll take a while before it's fully incorporated, and then a while longer because it's really creamed. See you in a few. We're going to make the crumb topping first. Now the original recipe, which I got for a friend, said put the crumbs in the freezer because the temperature of the crumbs make a difference when it bakes. But I found that if I make the crumbs first and then just quickly put them in the freezer while I make the rest of the cake, then that's enough time and I don't have to refrigerate them for hours. You know me, when I'm ready to do it, I'm ready to do it. So we're going to have 1 cup and a quarter of regular all-purpose flour. Remember, any recipe, not just mine, anybody's, that calls for flour means all-purpose flour. If they want you to use something like wheat flour, rye flour, cake flour, self-rising, they will tell you that in the recipe. So flour means all-purpose flour. So we have 1 cup and a quarter of flour. We're going to put a cup of regular granulated sugar, 3/4 of a cup of regular granulated sugar. And 1 tablespoon of ground cinnamon. And we're just going to mix this. And I'll tell you that this recipe came from a neighbor of mine. She had made one of my recipes, the chocolate banana cake. And she said she'd taken it to Hope Lodge, and everybody loved it. And I said, what's Hope Lodge? Well, it turns out Hope Lodge is like a Ronald McDonald House for cancer patients. It's right at the border of Philadelphia and Montgomery County. And people come from all over for treatment at the wonderful facilities in the Philadelphia area. They have their own bedroom, their own bath, they have a special place for their food. They have lots of people who come in and help them. And once a month, my neighbor, who was with a Catholic ladies group, did an English tea, and they would take baking. And I said, oh, I'd love to do that. Could I be your push-in Protestant? So I joined the group, and for many years, I went to Hope Lodge, and I got this recipe from my neighbor, and her name is Marion. And I miss my neighbors because now you know I have moved. So I've mixed this very well. And now I'm going to see if my butter has melted, and I'm going to make crumbs. Well, it not only is melted, it's hot. Let me get a towel. Now, I have another crumb cake recipe that's on YouTube. But as I told everybody when I made it, it's like the Entenmann's, and it's more crumb than cake, and the crumbs are very crunchy. My husband did not care for it. He felt it was too crunchy. This has the advantage of crumbs, but they will not be as hard. So we're just going to mix this up. Sometimes forks are really handy. And then we're going to put it in the freezer while we make the cake. Now, as you can see, some of the pieces are larger. And I'm not going to worry about that, because when I put it on the cake, I will make sure I break it into smaller pieces. But there's our crumbs. And again, this bowl is going in the freezer while we do the cake. The next thing we add is our eggs, and you know my rule on eggs. If I ever go a year without getting a shell, I'll stop separating them before I put it into the main bowl, but it hasn't happened yet. So I'll crack it, I'll break it, I'll make sure there's no shell in it, and then I'm going to add it. Our mixture is well creamed, and it is ready for the 2 eggs. And we will just beat that up for a minute. Now, the next most typical way of doing a cake is to combine the dry ingredients, and that's what we're going to do. So we have 2 cups of flour. I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of baking soda, and forget the, I'm sorry, baking powder. Forget the baking soda. There's none in this cake. I'm getting old, folks. Forgive me. So we're going to do 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And if you're not sure whether your baking powder is active because you've had it so long, take a little water and put a little in. And if it doesn't bubble, then it's not active and it's not going to do its job. So be careful to notice that. So we have the flour, the baking powder. Now we need 1 teaspoon of regular salt. And we're just going to stir this together. Now, why do I make so many coffee cakes? A coffee cake is the most versatile cake you can make. I got some comments, and people said, "Where's the coffee? There's no coffee in the coffee cake." And I thought that was odd. So I responded to both of those, and they were both from Europe. And I had to explain, no, in America, a coffee cake is a cake that's served with coffee. It doesn't have coffee in it generally. It might be a flavor, but not generally. It's usually done in a pan that you just cut it right out of the pan, warm, and serve it. So you don't have to worry about turning it out, chilling it. You don't have to worry about frosting it. It usually has perhaps a crumb on it, and then maybe a little drizzle of something that you put on. You can have it with coffee in the morning. You could take it in a box lunch. You could have it with tea in the afternoon, a dessert at night, a snack after dinner. So a coffee cake is a wonderfully versatile cake to have in your repertoire. So we're going to make sure that this is all stirred. Now remember, I just put 2 white items into white flour. So I'm not really going to be able to see if it's totally incorporated. So I would rather do it a few more minutes just to make sure I got everything. Then the next step, which is typical with most cakes and like this, we're going to alternate putting in the dry and the wet. We're going to start and end with the dry. So we're going to do dry, wet, dry, wet, dry probably. And that is a cup of whole milk. And that is the liquid that we're using today for this. So we're going to start. Now, when you're creaming something, you can cream it quite a while. When you add the eggs, you're still okay. Once you start adding the flour, you want to mix it as little as possible, just enough to incorporate the flour, and at a very low speed, because it can make a cake tough if you overbeat it after you start this alternating of the dry and the wet. I'm going to start with the dry, big spoonfuls, and I know it worries people that I turn my mixer on and off rather than just low. I have to say, folks, I've had this mixer for 25 years and I've never had a day's problem, never had a minute's problem. And when I add flour, I do a little on and off. Remember, you certainly don't want to have a high speed or you'll have flour flying. Remember, I've talked about this beater before. Now you can hardly see it because of the stuff that's on it, but this has a rubber flange around it. And that is really good. It's an extra. I bought it separate from the mixer. But what it means is that it really goes around and cleans the side of the bowl. And so you're not having to stop as often to incorporate what's on the side into the main mixture. So I think that's pretty good. Now we're going to add some of our milk. Did you notice the apron? This is a new apron. Tom had them made with our logo. It's really nice. It even has pockets. And you can buy one if you want. I think there's information at the bottom of the video. But it's fun to see it. It's fun to have it. And it's really fun to see my grandson. Now we're going to do the rest of the milk. And the spot I got on my wrist reminds me, be careful, Gloria, when you're putting milk in the bowl. Now, I think we've done it. And done it means we've incorporated everything together. It's a smooth mixture. Now, I have a 13 by 9 pan, and I already greased and floured it. I take kind of an easy way of flouring it. I grease it, I put some flour in the pan, turn it all over to cover all sides, and then I hold it over the sink and give it a whack to get out that extra flour. And that works for me. Now, remember, as I've often said with many recipes, you can take almost any 13 by 9 recipe and turn it into, half it into an 8-inch square. I've made this cake many times and just made an 8-inch square at half the recipe. And that's true with almost any 13 by 9 cake. The same thing with an 8, just double it in a 13 by 9. For you mathematicians, no, it's not an exact fractional, but it's fine. Well, we're ready to put our batter in the pan. As I said, the pan has been prepared with shortening and flour. Now, if I were going to turn this cake out like a regular cake, I would have lined it with parchment paper because that's a wonderful way to keep a cake from sticking, and then you can just turn it over. But we're not going to turn this cake over. We're going to eat this cake right out of the pan, so I don't put parchment paper in that case. I just butter it or shortening and flour it, just like the recipe calls for, because it will help it come out. This is our batter. It's a nice thick cake batter. We're going to distribute it evenly. Over the whole pan. This is a nice spatula. I've mentioned it to you before. I bought this at a wonderful cooking shop in Maine on my way up there one summer. Be sure when you get a spatula that you get something that is very sturdy. If you get one that's not sturdy and you're dealing with a heavy batter like a bread or something, that top may come right off, but this is nice and sturdy. And you just want to smooth it out to get it into the corners. And again, if somebody calls you and tells you they're coming over in an hour to visit, you could have a coffee cake ready for them. Now, these crumbs are hard and crumbly. Oh, this is like playing in the dirt. This is fun. But now see, there's a great big piece, so we're just going to break them into smaller crumbs. And it firmed up quite a bit, of course, because the butter started to harden. I think, as I mentioned to many of you, at times I would get a hunger at night. My husband was in bed and I thought, I want a snack. So I would make a coffee cake and I would have a piece, but then in the morning he'd have some for breakfast. So it worked out for both of us. So I'm really going to break up some of these larger crumbs. And you can see it just has tons of crumbs. And we're just going to spread it all over the cake. Now this is going to go into the oven for about 35 minutes at 350. And you can test it. And I think I told you my last time I couldn't find my cake tester. I used a straightened out paper clip. Anything that you can just put, and if you've baked a lot then you know, but if you don't, you want to put it in and you don't want it to come out wet with any dough on it. You want it to come out dry because that will mean it's done. Now sometimes a recipe will tell you not to do it in the middle, to do it around, because maybe it's going to continue to bake a little even after it's out. So we're almost done. There we go. We'll see you in about 35. Have you ever heard the expression mea culpa? That means I'm to blame. I'm the one who did it. I forgot the vanilla. I have it sitting there. It was on my list. What I need is an intercom with all of you people. And you can say, Gloria, Gloria, you forgot something. Well, you didn't. I mean, you didn't tell me. And I goofed. I hope it's good anyway. Maybe I should put no vanilla was harmed during the making of this video. So now it's out. I tested it. I came out and it was nice and dry inside. And I'm going to sprinkle it with 10x sugar. Now we're not going to cut it right away. We'll wait a few minutes. I have a dispenser for 10x sugar, which is great, but it has a cover on it, and that's good because that keeps the sugar dry. If you don't have a cover, if you do have a dispenser but there's no cover for it, put saran wrap or something over and a rubber band because it will, otherwise it'll get lumpy. So we're just going to give some nice 10x trim to this. I've cut my first piece. The plate is still warm because the cake is warm, but it can be eaten this way. It can be fine. Look at this. Promise you it's yummy, folks. I thank you again for visiting in the kitchen. It means the world to me that you come, and I love to hear your comments. By the way, I would love some comments on maybe the changes that you've made since COVID. Did you have habits that you had before that you find you don't need anymore? Did you find something new that you started that you continue up? I'd be very interested in hearing because I think COVID has been such a huge unexpected change for all of us where we all had to adapt. I hope now that things are looser, we're talking the summer of 2021, that things are getting better for you. And I hope you're able to enjoy things like this coffee cake with your friends. So come back to the kitchen anytime, subscribe, and thanks again.